Yasmin Ferries, and this is my Pecha Kucha presentation. This presentation may include some images that may be offensive or upsetting to some viewers, so just bear that in mind when viewing this. Texture in a 3D way. This is because the last 2 years I have been online and therefore been very digital, as it portrays better than photograph 3D work on our workflows, for example. This year I'm making it my mission to go and push the boundaries of texture and explore what I can do with it. This slide has an almost onomatopoetic way of showing texture, with the word texture also being textured. I kind of like the play on words with this and the idea of this, and it'll be interesting to try and twist this into my work somehow. Texture, I could go around London and my hometown in Hastings, sketching and observing, but only texture. This will be by holding a piece of paper over certain materials and comparing man-made versus organic and seeing what there's more of in the different places. And trying to think of if there's a difference between London and Hastings, or whether they're just very similar but just different in size. Texture manipulation and the use of texture to create another shape or an idea just by the way I've used a material. This would be a more fluid way of experimentation, using fabric maybe. This could lead to ideas of the presentation and optical illusions, as it wouldn't be what it would first seem. People would have to look into it a bit more. Texture manipulation, but a more patterned and routine way. This could be things like origami. It's more of a structured kind of texture manipulation, this idea, rather than just a free-flowing material, maybe using paper in a solid way to create different textures and patterns. It's called Helmo, who I have found on my search for texture. They have used the textures within the photos to layer the image to create a shape. This is a sense of optical illusion and something to figure out. This means that the viewer has to actually look at the image to try and figure out what is going on. The image seems pretty normal, but the more you look into the image, the more you see, like little hidden things and layers. I really like this idea of taking two images and kind of exposing them over each other to then create a different shape. In the image to the left, you can kind of see that it looks like the man is growing out of the field, whereas the image on the right, it kind of looks like an old fairy tale with the creature storming down from the mountains. Ideas of texture on a microscopic level. This makes me interested about scale and the ideas of creating something 3D on a large scale that is normally small, maybe. The images you see here are butterfly wings and moth wings. It's kind of something that we don't normally see, but when you actually look into it, this is what they look like. One of my next kind of keywords was color layering. Now, what happens with this? That's kind of what I want to explore. We all know that layering colors is what allows us to print images, screen print, and create different types of art. It's what allows us to have photos. It's how printers work. They just layer colors on top of each other. As kids, we were all playing around with mixing paints, and they'd always turn to brown if we mixed the colors together. But what happens if you layered them? Would the same thing still happen? Would they still just come out like a muddy brown? Certain colors also have like certain connotations with them. So would this affect the overall appearance of an image by what color you use? I kind of want to play around with this idea. I also am very interested in drawing with coloured pencils and kind of layering that on top of each other, because it's kind of like a Where's Wally? You have to find like certain images hidden within. Roberto Fonfria, excuse my awful pronunciation, but I like the way that he's combined collage but also layering slight amount of colour. Almost gives it a kind of gory feeling because he's used the colour red, and places that he's used it as if there's cannibalism going on. The more you read into what he's written, it's more of like a con against these people. Now, when he was creating this work, he doesn't actually know any of these people. He just chucked it all on a bit of paper and just did what his heart said to do. But I think that this is a very playful way of using colour in a very quick method and layering. Helmo once again, but he's using layering in a different way this time. Before we saw him using texture to create shapes out of photography, whereas now he's kind of using the same kind of ideas of photography and layering, but he's contrasting blue and reds and colour layering in effect to then create different textures onto the people. He's done many examples of these and all of them are brilliant, and just kind of this idea of red and blue really kind of captivates me in a way, because blue is normally quite sad and red is quite angry and dark. So why has he used the animals to be red and angry rather than the people as they stereotypically would be in comparison? It's just kind of interesting, and I like the textures that it creates when you layer it. I can't really pronunciate, so excuse my pronunciation, but it's Yayo Kasuma. We normally see her artwork as being just dots. She had a thing recently in the Tate, but I quite like this kind of repetitiveness of the same shape of an eye rather than just being dots like her usual work and just kind of different colours. Why did she choose to do an eye? Kind of the way that they all form and surround this big creature in the middle. It's just kind of interesting. Like, what does the different colours mean? Why are they all different colours? Why did she not just choose all of the smaller ones to be a certain colour and the big one a certain colour? It's kind of just interesting how she's used colour and texture, and there's still a story even though there's only like 2 shapes in it. Doesn't really use colour, however they use layering in a very clever way. The artist is Tang Kwon Hin, and they use images that have been printed onto tracing paper, and they layer these images up to then create stories. Again, at a first glance, you kind of think that it's one thing, but as you can see on the image on the left, if you look into it, there's these huge wasps that are attacking the traffic lights that are just so out of proportion with traffic lights that you know that this isn't real. It also gives kind of like an eerie feel, like a fogginess to the images. In the bottom right corner, you've got like this swimming pool kind of effect, but there's a town that's drowning inside the swimming pool. Just this kind of like play on ideas, and it's just so random that it makes you think, why have they done this? But I love like the fogginess effect of layering the tissue paper and the tracing paper on top of each other. Thursday sessions that was mentioned, and I just kind of fell in love with this piece of work. The name is Molly Mendoza. I just like the colour, the fact that you can't really tell whose limb is who. There's extra legs, extra hands everywhere, and it doesn't really make sense, but you can tell what's going on still. Is it the fact of putting extra limbs in to show different emotions? Like, you've got a blue fist. Are they angry, but yet you've got a red hand down on the middle right? Is that anger exploding out of the person? Is the hug creating a sense of rage? Has something happened? This kind of idea of you don't really know what's going on, but it still kind of makes sense is very interesting to me. You can tell as well that they've used different materials. It looks like a mix of watercolour, but then also pencil. And this kind of creates an almost personal piece because of this. You can tell it's quite delicate because of the pieces of materials that they've chosen to use. So I just kind of like this work. It's very provoking. So I did this piece of work last year. It was all about the idea of me growing up into who I am today and how we kind of hide our past as we grow up and we kind of forget about it. So on the left, it's me as a young child, and then I slowly grow up into this person and I morph into who I am today. I did this by layering tracing paper on top of each other so I could then still remove the layers of who I am. This was very fun to do, and seeing the final piece, you can still see the main image, but if you look closely, because of the different colours used, you can still see every single layer underneath, and I like this idea of still being able to see the process. It's controversy. I kind of like the idea of this, I don't know, creating a piece of work that makes people think and kind of question themselves and maybe their morals, but not to an extent that it's offensive. I decided to use Comic Sans to write this out because that can be seen as a very controversial font. Some people see it as lazy, but some people see it as clever. It is used, Comic Sans is used and very popular, but it is hated by many. course, I found this piece of work. So this is Marcel Duchamp, The Fountain, and it was in 1917. I did a massive project back then on art versus design and what makes art and what makes design design, and things like this is what merged it in the middle. This was a urinal that you just pulled off the wall, and he signed it and placed it upside down on a plinth in a gallery and said, that's art. However, it made loads of questions as somebody had already designed it, so people were saying, actually, you can't class it as art because you haven't made it yourself. All you've done is take a urinal off the wall, flip it upside down and sign it, so it can't be art. This then created a massive movement about what is art, and this led to people putting sunglasses in the corner of the room and silly things like this to then kind of push the boundaries of what art actually is. And we can still see this today in Tate galleries and everything, of the thing like the unmade bed. Some people believe that it isn't a piece of art, but once you read into it, it actually tells a story. So is it still art? Of course, this image kind of provoked quite a lot of emotions. This is Alan Kurdi. This was during the refugee crisis, and we were kind of speaking about how this image was spread quite worldwide, and was it politically correct? The questions were, is it right to publicise an image of a dead child? Now, the balance against that was all about, it was all for the right reasons. Obviously, an image of a dead child is going to send a shockwave through the nation. So will this cause people to fight for the refugees and actually make a change for these people? However, it got a lot of backlash and a lot of different things, and people were posting this all on social media, and it became kind of a trending thing rather than actually doing the thing it was meant to do, which is help out the people in the refugee crisis. We also saw t-shirts with this image printed on being sold, and people were saying that it was all going towards the funding for the refugee crisis, but was this people just taking advantage? And also, would you walk around with a t-shirt with a dead person or a dead child on the t-shirt? It creates moral questions of what is actually correct and what should be done about it. After finding this image in CTS, I got really shocked about the whole t-shirt with a dead child printed on it, that I thought, what would be even more controversial? What would push people to question things even more? So I did some illustrations and put these illustrations on condom wrappers. Now, obviously, sex is meant to be an enjoyable thing, but would you question it if just before you saw an image of a dead child? Because that's effectively what you're doing. Some things are said to be more questionable than the others, and it all leads to different religions. And kind of this is what I wanted to play on, was questioning everybody's morals rights. Even though you're an atheist, does that still shock you? Or the one on the right, if you're not an atheist, will you then think again about having sex? It's kind of, is it that controversial that it's going to affect your day-to-day actions? That also influenced me. When I was younger, I was addicted to this film called the Fern Gully movie. Growing up, I thought nothing of it. It was just this animated movie all about fairies in a forest. Their forest starts getting knocked down, and then they fight for it back. But after a few years and looking back on the film and rewatching it growing up, I saw that there was a few articles about the controversy towards the film. There was a couple of things saying that it was really impressionable towards the kids, and that people are going to believe that there's this big oil monster that comes out of the ground, and that actually it's going to scare them to not do anything about it rather than make them think about the deforestation issues. This just kind of interested me because I thought, as a kid, I thought it was something so innocent, but actually growing up and looking back at it, how it's been twisted into something else. A shoe shop, and one of the things was we have these massive sales, and it kind of just got me thinking, if you placed a sale label on a person, what question would then that lead to people? I say this because the sale sticker accidentally got stuck to me and we were all joking about it, but actually, as a woman with a sale sticker on it, how does that make them feel? How does that relate to anything? Does that cause questions of feminism and concern, or like what would happen? So maybe I might create a top from these and kind of post pictures and see what the reaction is. But it just kind of got me thinking about the feminist movement and how such a simple thing could cause such a big controversy.